Hi everyone, I'm here in the extreme southeast Texas, as far south as you can go and still be in the US. And behind me you can see an example of what is called a tropical thorn forest. Sounds a little dangerous. You certainly have to be careful when you're walking through because there's cacti, there's other leafy plants, but they all have thorns too. And so it's just a really neat place. But in this forest live a whole bunch of birds you don't see anywhere else in the US. So I've got my camera and binoculars. Let's go see what we can find. Because it's so thick in here, it's sometimes hard to find them. You have to find little openings and look very carefully because some of the most interesting ones are very camouflaged. Down in there is a common paraki. They are colored like the dead leaves on the bottom of the forest floor, and you can almost be standing on them before you see them. Also on the forest floor, you can find Inca doves. They look like our mourning doves, but they've got all those little scaly ends to their feathers and a really red eye. This one's a lot bigger. This is the white-tipped dove. Notice that little white tip on the tail. And we also have white-winged doves. And it's kind of obvious why they're called that. And if you set up a feeder in a thorn forest, you're going to get these. They are called plain chacalaca. What a cool name. Chacalacas are kind of like our turkeys, only much smaller. And this one is a clay-colored thrush. It's a lot like our robin, and you can imagine if you just painted it different colors, it could look like our American robins that we have in Michigan. In addition to thrushes, we have thrashers. This is a curved-billed thrasher. Look at the cool eye. And this one also has a cool eye, but this is the long-billed thrasher. And sometimes we don't find birds. We find collared peccaries or javelinas. There's a hummingbird that breeds in this forest called the buff-bellied hummingbird. And it likes to come to feeders if you put them up too. A woodpecker that likes to live here is the golden-fronted woodpecker. You can see there's a little gold color right behind the bill in front of the eyes. The male has an additional red spot, and you can see even yellow on the belly. This was our favorite bird we saw on our Texas trip. This is the crimson-collared grosbeak. It's the only one that we know of living in the US. The rest of them live in Mexico. Now you may be thinking that this thorn forest is kind of boring. All the birds are dark colored. Boy, are there some exceptions, like this green jay. They're kind of raucous and a little bit of a bully like our blue jays here in Michigan, but they're almost the size of a crow and they're incredibly colored. That blue and black head, and then their body is greenish yellow, and depending on the way the light shines, sometimes it's more green and sometimes it's more yellow. But they're just beautiful birds to watch when you have a feeder set up in a thorn forest. And then there's the great kiskadee. It's a type of flycatcher. They like to make a lot of noise, and they're pretty colorful too. One of my favorites is the vermilion flycatcher. It's incredibly colored. It likes to fly out and grab an insect and then land back on a branch and eat it. This is the Altamira oriole. It's much bigger than our oriole that we have here in Michigan. They love the feeders, including stealing food from the hummingbird feeders or peanut butter. So what's the lesson that we can learn from the thorn forest? Well, the Bible tells us not to look at the outward appearance, but to look at people's hearts. And I think that's a good lesson for us. Because from the outside, the thorn forest looks all kind of thorny and not very inviting. But when you take a closer look, you see all the treasures that are hidden inside. And I think that's the same with people. If we get to know our neighbors and friends better, we learn more about who they are. We can appreciate them for who they are rather than just judging them from the outside. Well, that's all for today from the Nature Guy. We'll see you next time.